So I thought we could talk about Tulsi and the peace nomination.
So this is fantastic. Okay. Now,
okay.
how many Americans know there is such a thing as an American Peace Prize?
I know, seriously. But yeah, so Tulsi is nominated for the 2020 U.S. Peace Prize. She is if she would win, she would be amongst a pretty cool crowd.
Dennis.
First one to win was Cindy Sheehan back in 2009.
Yeah, right.
Dennis Kucinich, Noam Chomsky, Medea Benjamin, Chelsea Manning, organizations like Code Pink, Veterans for Peace, and the last year's winner who was Ajamu Baraka.
Fantastic.
And then
good company.
She's also, she's up against some pretty heavy contenders with Daniel Ellsberg, who is known for his releasing of the Pentagon Papers. Steve, do you want to talk a little bit about the Pentagon Papers, the importance of that?
Well, I mean, he became famous in the 70s for releasing with Mike Gravel, who was a senator from Alaska.
Well, he read it into
the congressional record.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So this was basically the secret plans of the Pentagon for Vietnam that were totally at odds with what they were publicly saying. Sound familiar? I don't know. It seems like history repeats itself.
Mm-hmm.
And Ellsberg also is currently, very outspoken about U.S. foreign policy, and I think this award is probably in recognition of his past history, but even more in recognition of what he's been doing recently in terms of criticizing the whole war machine. I mean, both parties.
Yeah.
Curious, did nobody read the Afghanistan papers that showed they've been lying to us for 8 years?
Right.
And truly, no one read those into the congressional record, right?
Tulsi still has time, right?
Yeah, come on, Tulsi.
Okay. So
I think it's great that that Tulsi is being nominated for this, because I think
she's being recognized, right?
She's being recognized, because it seems like one day we hear she's a Russian asset, then we hear she's whatever, a Hindu nationalist. We just hear all these different things, and then it's nice to hear something positive about somebody. Obviously, we all worked in the Tulsi campaign, so we believed in that platform, even if we didn't agree with her 100% on every issue. But just her main issue was fighting against the war machine, which was sucking up so much of our taxpayer dollars and resources, as well as Go ahead.
And she was purely brave the way she called these things out constantly. She called out the military industrial complex. She called out the deep state, quote, permanent state, for pushing Russiagate and getting us into a dangerous Cold War. She said, like, if she was the president, the first thing she would do is go meet with the nuclear powers, right? We just have this conflict with China and India, right, which raises the specter of global annihilation. And she was saying she would go and talk to all these countries and try and work towards peace and disarmament. So it's fantastic she gets this recognition.
Right. I think the most important thing that is being highlighted from this nomination is her work in diplomacy. I think that and the fact that that garnered so much support for her, the fact that she was so emphatic about creating this level of diplomacy globally, that was so important to her. I think that it could set a precedent for future nominees, presidential nominees, or just for people working in our Congress, it's just to know that it is something that is highly supported by the American populace. People want peace and diplomacy, and I think that she is an exemplar of this. So I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, even to the point of disagreeing with the other candidates on stage, right, in the debate stage, where they're like mocking her for saying she would go meet with anyone to pursue peace, and also her being supportive of Trump meeting with North Korea. Basically, anything to pursue peace, anything to keep the American people safer. It's fantastic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So another person that I thought that is really incredible and his work needs to be highlighted is Major Danny Sjursen, which I'm sure if you look at it, if you see his picture, you recognize him. He's been on Jimmy Dore. He's been on the 0 Hour. The Democracy Now. He's been on a bunch of places, but right now he writes for antiwar.com, and essentially he is. So he writes here for professional purposes. He gives the whole like spiel of let's see, where is it? Okay, so he's a retired U.S. Army officer and a contributing editor to antiwar.com. And I love antiwar.com. I think it's amazing. But in his latest piece, it's called Alone and Unafraid, Welcome to Chickenhawk America, which I thought it was really funny because I feel like Tulsi, remember when she called Trump's cabinet Chickenhawks?
Yes.
When she called them out on Twitter. I thought that was really cool. But in this piece, it's definitely worth a read, and I will put the link below.
Nice.
So you can check it out. But in the piece, he talks about the first part. He talks about how much shit essentially he gets constantly, about how he's also called a Russian asset and all of this shit the same way that Tulsi was called. But he highlights the fact that there is a lot of soldier dissent. Which is, to me, it's really important because those are the people that we send overseas to go and kill and ruin the lives of all these people overseas, right? And we don't think about the effects that this has on the veterans, right? On the effects that it has on their families, which that was a big thing that Tulsi was always talking about, is the fact that they're the ones who have to pay the price, right? The ultimate price has to be paid by these soldiers. So this was essentially a response to the orders by Trump to essentially activate the National Guard, how he threatened that if the governors didn't activate them, that he would activate the National Guard. And on About Face, which I guess is like this platform for veterans, they actually have an open letter, which I thought was really cool. It's this open letter from veterans to recently activated National Guard troops, and it's essentially a call for them to refuse orders to activate. And what I thought was really amazing, the line from this that I really liked was, "We know that it is your intention to be of service and prevent more harm, but we urge you to remember the deadly legacy of the National Guard enacting violence against protesters. Watts in 1965, Kent State in 1970, Los Angeles in 1992, and many other examples in recent history. The military is designed to be lethal, not to de-escalate," which I thought that was so pertinent for them to say that, because that is the truth. That is the problem, that our military, they have their scope is different. When they go in somewhere, it's to extract whatever it is that they need to extract or control whatever situation by any means necessary. And it is just for their safety. That's all they're worried about, because they're not serving these people, right? They're literally just there to follow orders, do their duty, and then that's it.
And it's interesting in the context of our discussion of police militarization of the police from last week that the police have moved in that direction. I don't think the police would agree they're designed to be lethal, but definitely they've become more militarized and have moved in that direction, right?
Yep.
Interesting.
And I think that it's really important to keep the conversation of peace and diplomacy and obviously not activating these National Guard on our streets, because we're being distracted by all of these other stories that are going on right now, whether it be because of the pandemic or because of the riots, and these are all distractions, right? That to keep you from looking at what's actually going on. There's actually a lot that is going on that's continuing to go on foreign policy wise, and no one is actually talking about it because of the fact that we're so distracted by all these other things. But in the sense, it's just like how they continue to inflict poverty on people, right? Because if you're poor, you're too busy, you're too distracted worrying about where your next meal is going to come from to worry about, you know, people being bombed overseas or even anything that goes on here. You know, like when all the protesters were being attacked, you know, at Standing Rock, a lot of people, they just didn't have the time for it. Why? Because they have all this other shit going on that they don't have the bandwidth to be able to deal with this, right? And that is on purpose. That is, to me, poverty is violence committed by the state.
Yeah, and also at the same time, just to add to what you're saying, you know, very few people, you know, relatively speaking, are looking at antiwar.com, and very few people are looking at Jimmy Dore. And you know, if you look at MSNBC or CNN, you know, they might filter a lot of this stuff out because they're essentially, you know, state propaganda.
Right. And then the other thing that I really liked from his piece was the fact that he talks about elite fear, and he talks about how the media uses these retired generals and all this to essentially manufacture consent from the audience, you know, to be able to commit whatever sort of atrocities it is that they want to commit, or, you know, to infringe on our freedoms, right? And under the guise of doing it for our own good.
I'm sorry, you're talking about like these kind of stateside actions, or are you talking about you know, foreign wars?
Well, so like if you look at the engagements overseas, you see how they bring out these generals in order to manufacture consent. So thinking that, oh well, we're trying to help these people, right? We're bringing them democracy. That's always,
of course,
you know, like essentially what he writes about in his piece is that the media uses this trust that the American people have in our veterans, and they parade them out so that they can say, oh look, see, if our veterans agree with this, then it must be okay for us to do this.
Well, it's not just like the media using them, but it's like the national security state using the media to use these people, you know, so they're getting advertising
Project
dollars.
Mockingbird, right? That's what that whole thing
but
was.
I mean, and the classic case is the build up to the Iraq War in 2003. You had all these generals going on talking about, you know, Saddam's imminent threat to the United States because of weapons of mass destruction, and how he was supporting Al Qaeda, which all turned out to be absolute lies. But you know, that was a very orchestrated attempt to manufacture consent.
Sure, you have to look for several things they do. First, they work on fear, right? They bring out cartoons of mobile chemical weapon labs that never existed. They never had any actual, you know, but they drew a cartoon of it, and people said, oh, that's what it is, you know. Colin Powell waving around some yellow cake uranium, right? So all these things. Then the other thing is
or the threat level. You remember after 9/11, it was constantly the red alert. The threat level.
And the other thing is to dehumanize those that you want to go after. So you talk about them going into neonatal care and throwing babies out of incubators, and, you know, raping and all this stuff. And so they have all these avenues to lie to us, to basically to sell weapons, so they can, you know, get into a war to use up weapons. And
right.
And
it wasn't that case.
Whatever,
the case
you know?
where pulling the babies out of incubators was from the Iraq invasion of Kuwait in 1990. And they had congressional testimony of this woman who said that, you know, she was firsthand witness to this, as Saddam's troops went in there and they just, you know, massacred babies. And turns out the woman was a daughter of the, you know, Kuwaiti ambassador or something like, right?
Sure,
so,
just
she didn't divulge.
Just that woman that, you know, Jimmy Dore and everybody loved to laugh about, that was reporting for CNN, that was sniffing the backpack that supposedly had sarin gas on it or something like that, and she was the daughter of the person that had been displaced as leader there or something like that. It's just it's like, you've got to be kidding me, you know. But that's how much lack of respect they have for their audience at this point.
I mean, it seems like it started,
and the state media.
I remember it started in the 80s with Reagan, when we had like the invasion of Grenada, which was like, I mean, to rescue medical students. And this was like in whenever it was, the mid 80s. And I mean, it was a joke because like Grenada, I mean, what do they have in terms of like defenses? And the US the most powerful military in the world attacking this little, country in the
Right.
Caribbean.
Yeah.
I mean, but I remember there was all this build up to it, like how it's like we're proud of our troops again. And it was to get rid of this, to throw off this whole, shadow of Vietnam legacy that we were ashamed, whatever. We could be proud of our troops again.
Oh,
We could put a little ribbon on our car, to show our support for the troops. And remember in 1990 I support our troops in the Gulf. That was a popular bumper sticker everywhere.
yeah,
And it
yeah.
was like, definitely manufactured consent, but it was trying to throw off that yoke of shame from Vietnam, that we're proud again. We're proud to exercise our power. And so Grenada was almost like a joke because, Grenada is no threat to the U.S., right? But it was kind of a practice run for what was to come. And then it was, Bush. Remember Bush getting a standing ovation for both parties in Congress after he had, pushed Iraq back into Kuwait. Even though it's pretty clear that Bush gave Saddam the okay to go into Kuwait before that, but
yeah.
But I mean, it's just like, and younger people don't remember. They don't remember the Vietnam. But I think that whole thing started with Reagan. Be proud of America again. Be proud of our troops, and it's okay for us to exercise our military power around the world.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, I could also see Grenada. That makes a good sense of Grenada. I could also just imagine them just saying, "Well, we've got these new weapons we need to try in a realistic scenario," and they're like, "Who's out there? We could drum up an excuse to go."
I mean, it's one step above a military.
Yeah.
It's like a military exercise. It's like
Yeah.
it's a real country, but is it? It's a real country.
Right.
So like.
Well, but that is the American exceptionalism, right? That we can do whatever it is that we want, but we hold other countries to different standards. And ultimately, that's why not holding any of these people accountable, that is why that is so dangerous. And that's why I always go back to that anytime that they want to talk about any sort of crimes that other countries are committing. I want to see the moment that we start to hold these people in power, when we start to hold them to account, and they have to pay the price for the lies that they have spread in order to continue to murder and pillage across the world, then I don't want to hear it.